映画な面白男伊丹十三があのスイートホームのファミコン化に成功したぞ。
1989 was a stellar year for the video game market. Many plastic cartridges that would go on to become timeless classics and important pieces of gaming history spawned from this era. The adolescent innocence and discovery that defined the 80s would gradually begin to shift towards the edgier and more complex advances in tech and over-the-top illustrative mediums. The final years during the decade of decadence blessed video game enthusiasts with gems like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Final Fight, and the debut of the Sega Genesis and the TurboGrafx 16 in North America. Let's also not forget a rather smaller release and the very first Nintendo Game Boy, birthing with it Tetris and Super Mario Land. But it was back in Japan where this fascinating story begins and ultimately ends. This infamous cutscene from the Sony PlayStation's Resident Evil cemented the new dawn of video game graphics and technology, capable of slithering its horrific vision deep into your brain, enabling a fear that has never before been experienced. What if I was to tell you Resident Evil wasn't the first of its kind, but rather a remake? What if I also told you there was a companion film produced alongside a video game that would become a very important piece of horror history? This is the story of Sweet Home, the video game and film that would go on to be the precursor to one of horror's most popular franchises. I hope you enjoy the show.
Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, Albert Wesker.
Sweet Home's eerie web was first spun in 1989 from Japanese filmmaker Kiyoshi Kurosawa, a cherished director who would be labeled the David Cronenberg of Japan due to grisly and lurid films like Pulse. Sweet Home's bizarre tale finds an intimate film crew fascinated with the works of famed painter Ichiro Mamiya. Their purpose is to locate and restore many of the artist's precious frescoes which were left behind within the walls of the ill-fated artist's home. A creepy mansion which has been abandoned for 30 years, a house of secrets. Mamaya's final fresco, a vast piece of art that has never been witnessed by the public, also resides inside the hallowed home. The crew also plans to film a documentary centered on Mamaya and his illustrious pieces of art. Hoshino Kazu, the crew's director, an honest man who constantly fears for his daughter's safety. His feelings for Akiko are obvious, but his constant anxiety and pressures of being a single parent collide with the horrors of film production. His daughter Emmy, who is on a summer vacation, accompanies the crew as a production assistant and guide. Emmy lost her mother during childhood and has a close relationship with Akiko. As the crew navigates the murky corridors, the ghastly home doesn't deter Emmy from attempting to draw her father and Akiko closer together. Akiko Hayakawa is the film's producer and motherly figure. Her no-nonsense approach and stern attitude has earned her respect from her peers. An immensely confident woman, Akiko is regarded as the leader and eventually the hero of the day. Taguchi is the film's cameraman. This guy is infatuated with their professional reporter and can get a bit weird at times. Asuka, the esteemed journalist and art restorer, dreams of one day becoming famous and uses this special opportunity into making that happen. After being given clearance, the small crew enters Mamaya's home, hoping to uncover wondrous works of art, but what they find is nothing short of haunting and tragic.
You cannot beat us.
In March of 1996, the term survival horror would be birthed by the release of Capcom's Resident Evil on the Sony PlayStation, known as BIOHAZARD in Japan. This future juggernaut captivated horror fans and gamers alike with its intense gameplay and at the time, revolutionary FMV cutscenes and voice acting, keeping audiences engrossed as they traverse an ill-fated Raccoon City mansion. The static hallways and chambers combined with the now infamous cheesy-ass dialogue, Resident Evil would influence a plethora of new IPs searching for their piece of the pie, cementing survival horror as the next big thing. Combining puzzle solving, resource management, and cutting-edge disturbing visuals gloss over pixelated violence and gore. Horror in video games wasn't a new concept, however, the roots stem further back as Resident Evil itself was a remake of one of the pioneers of survival horror way back in its infancy. Enter Sweet Home. Directed by video game designer Takeru Fujiwara, this lost gem provided an early stage for the survival horror concept, introducing players to the Japanese RPG menu-driven gameplay, spawning random battles, pitting your cast against zombies, ghosts, and other supernatural monstrosities. Even the infamous loading screen doors were featured in Sweet Home before earning notoriety amongst early PlayStation users. The title packed quite the gut punch in terms of difficulty and decision making, forcing players to make choices that can impact your experience. Jump scares were also used in Sweet Home, a novel concept rarely experienced in video games prior. While Sweet Home was the base for the creation of Resident Evil, even more fascinating was the synergy between film and game. For the first time, a home console game and movie were created parallel to one another, using transmedia as the storytelling basis, as well as the game and film creators collaborating alongside each other. Both movie and video game would release almost simultaneously in Japan of 1989, debuting on the Japanese FAMICOM, the Nintendo Entertainment System for American audiences. Sweet Home would not see a United States release due to the graphic nature of the themes and visuals, something that was quite unheard of for the family-friendly NES at the time. With an unforgiving difficulty and heavy text-based format, Sweet Home would remain buried within the forgotten Japanese titles, never to see the light of day in America. Even after 3 decades from release, the game's plot is pretty much intact from the film. You control the team of 5 characters, each with their own unique item like Kazu's lighter and Asuka's vacuum. Losing a character in Sweet Home is dire as permadeath await those who meet their fall within the mansion. Suddenly, every decision is crucial to success, solidifying Sweet Home as a title that has actual stakes, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat. The graphics cutscenes were wild at the time. Violence and gore on a Nintendo console during this era was unheard of, giving Sweet Home a rather notorious reputation as the title found moderate success upon release.
In the Nintendo game,
Another dead end.
Come on!
you can end up looking in all the wrong places.
Oh no!
Stand back, son.
Or you can go to Toys R Us. Toys R Us has the world's biggest selection of Nintendo games and accessories at everyday low prices.
Next time, let's just come to Toys R Us.
At its core, Sweet Home is your classic haunted house story. The dilapidated Mamaya house is without a doubt the main character of this film. A living and breathing entity consisting of heavy shadows, hidden dangers, and impending doom whispering behind your neck. A vengeful darkness kept alive by grief and infinite sadness. The forever midnight hour looming over the dusty mansion and its broken heart still beats for vengeance. Our protagonists find death around every dark corner, The film's gore is astonishing, and it's no surprise considering the legendary Dick Smith had his hands all over this project. Tauchi's death was slow and painful as the scene was purposely dragged to invoke an ascending panic attack into the audience, making you as uncomfortable as possible as the piercing sound design ruptures your eardrums. It's like a devastating car wreck that you can't take your eyes off of. Kenichi Yamamura's demise is quite possibly the movie's money shot, as Lady Mamaya's ravenous shade eats away at Yamamura's flesh, reducing him into the incredible melting man, liquefying the old bastard until he's nothing more than skeletal remains. Kenichi sacrificed his body and soul for Emi, but this is how his story ends. Sweet Home's climax finds Akiko face to face with the sorrowful Lady Mamaya in her fiercest form. In the end, this story embodies what love can do to a mother when it's stripped away from her. A mother's love is a sacrifice, and revenge is all that's left when that love is suddenly extinguished.
They will find you. Doug McClure, Anta Kell, Vic Morrow. Humanoids from the deep.
Sweet Home was absolutely an influence in both film and video games. There wouldn't be a Resident Evil or a Silent Hill if not for Sweet Home's ambitious transmedia experiment. Sweet Home is more than a film, it's an experience, one that should be more cherished and recognized for its earnest contribution to both film and gaming. The movie is currently on YouTube, so make sure you give it a watch, which is a solid bonus considering this film is almost impossible to find on physical media and streaming. And for you gamers out there, if you have the patience and resources, research some emulator options and happy hunting. Sweet Home is much more than a film, it's history.